Hi, I'm State Representative John Syback,
I'm Senator Don Humison.
and I guess we're in district.
Good afternoon.
This show must have had so much popularity last time they actually asked us to come
they
back
brought
a
us
second
back.
time.
High ratings.
Must be.
Yeah, yeah. Buy your commercial time now, I guess. It's like the Super Bowl. Well, we're very happy to be back. Actually, Representative Syback and I did our first show, was it just a month ago, or is it maybe a month and a half?
Longer.
And we both represent here the city of East Hampton. We thought it'd be a great idea to come and do a show with you every now and then and just talk about things that are going on at the state level where we work and also here in district.
And right now things are kind of exciting. I mean, we just wrapped up the budget. Next week, actually this week,
Yeah.
we're likely to start taking up some of the overrides of issues that Governor Baker has vetoed in the state budget. One of which is a vehicle for the city of East Hampton.
That's right.
Vehicle that was in such bad shape, the floorboards were rusting out, and they actually wound up having to bolt a stop sign to the bottom of the vehicle. So hopefully that'll get overridden tomorrow on the House side,
Yeah.
Thursday on your side, and East Hampton will get that new vehicle.
So we're taping the show at the end of, literally the end of July, and the legislature is about to go on its summer break for the month of August. So we have to literally do the things that Representative Syback was talking about. The governor signed the budget, $38 billion, but he vetoed certain sections of it, some line items and some earmarks that we as members had put in for our districts. This was a budget that was actually sort of, I called it pre-vetoed because both the governor and the legislature had to make cuts to the budget even going in because we had a deficit. So it was a pretty good budget process, one that both the House and Senate were nearly unanimous on, I think, in final votes. And even the governor in his vetoes didn't make a lot of them. That being said, it's the role of the governor to certainly make his cuts. It's also the role of the legislature and legislators like us to override those cuts. And those overrides have to begin in the House before they make it to the Senate. But since many of them involve programs that are of interest to you, our constituents, we're gonna take the right vote. I suspect as many of the overrides that come out of the House and make it to the Senate will be overridden by the senators as well.
Yeah, and really what the governor did in some cases was simply say, no, I'm reducing the amount because it's more than I put into my budget. Mm-hmm. So when we finished the House and Senate budget and sent it to the governor, it was a balanced budget. It was addressing a series of issues. And some of the issues, as I said, were items he said, no, I only thought we should fund it at this level. Legislature funded up here, and so I want to bring it back down to this level. And the other thing, as Don pointed out, were the earmarks, things like that vehicle. So there's specific items that may relate to a particular district or a particular legislator's personal interests. And I think that's kind of an important situation because the legislator really understands and knows what's important to the district. I mean, the governor certainly can't figure out what each of the particular needs are for 351 cities and towns. And I think it's important to have earmarks
I do too.
Provide communities what they need.
The governor sets the tone for the entire budget process. It's his budget that starts off the whole process back in January. But as John said, legislators are the closest to the people. We're the ones who live, work, and represent these towns in our district. So we know, well, with all due respect, I guess appropriately so, we know better in many cases than the governor and the executive what's happening here on the ground in towns like East Hampton or Southampton or any of the cities and towns in western Massachusetts. I'm a Republican. I like Governor Baker a great deal. I support him in many of the things he wants to do with limiting the increases in the size of our budget. But I also expect that I will take votes over the next couple of days to override his vetoes because I think they're appropriate for this district. The other thing we should talk about too that's good news is we recently received as a state information about how much the tax revenue monies were coming back in from you folks and from companies and organizations here in our state, and they're doing very, very well. So what was it, nearly 7% above benchmark?
Yeah. So we finished, we're closing out the fiscal year with more money in terms of revenues coming in than we'd expected. And we're also looking at things conservatively. We're not looking to spend every dollar.
That's right.
So, you pointed out you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat. So people have to assume, or some people may assume that, well, because Governor Baker's a Republican, I must really oppose everything he does. And in reality, it was a good budget. I think Governor Baker's working well with both the Speaker and with the Senate President.
That's right.
I supported many of the things that he put in his budget. I applauded him for doing some of the things. In fact, there's an earmark in Hadley, one of the other communities that I represent, that the governor did not veto. And I'm really appreciative of the fact that he left that earmark in. So it's not as contentious, certainly, as it is in Washington.
Thank
and
God.
the fact that a Republican and a Democrat can actually sit here and do a TV show together just proves that things really are different here in the Valley.
As it should be.
Absolutely.
And so some of the bigger issues in the budget that I think the legislature had a difference with the governor on, even from the beginning, the governor didn't fund our tourism line items as high as we would have preferred. And I know both the House and the Senate upped that amount in the final budget. I think the governor did he try to veto it back? I can't remember the exact line item. Anyway, he feels that certain things should be said at certain levels. We're going to disagree a little bit and just debate. But honestly, the final budgets were so close between what the Baker administration proposed and what the House and Senate ultimately gave back to them. So even with this veto exercise, I think we're going to have a very good budget that's balanced, that really attends to the needs of our constituents, both in Western Massachusetts and across the state. So by the end of this week, we'll have wrapped that up, and that along with a couple other things.
So where do we go from here?
You want to talk about the sales tax holiday? We debated that a little bit on the way in.
No, we expect that one of the things we're going to take up this week, again, is the state tax holiday, the sales tax holiday. It's been going on for almost a decade, and virtually every year, with the exception of one,
There was one year, that's right.
2009, we did not do it because of the economic situation in the Commonwealth. We'll take it up, and so the first time we did it, I believe it was one day. Then it expanded to a weekend.
It was a Saturday.
That's right. And now it's a Saturday, Sunday. I don't have the dates yet, but I think it's probably
we talked about the 15th, 16th, yeah.
15th and 16th of
August.
The interesting thing is that individuals certainly like it. They like the fact that they're not paying the 6.25% sales tax. But I've also heard from some businesses who say, it's really problematic in that I have to bring more staff on for that weekend. On Sundays, I'm paying people time and a half, and in reality, I don't see that I'm selling much more. I may be selling a lot that weekend, but it really is kind of balancing. People are holding back on buying things because of the sales tax holiday.
And that goes to the bigger issue about what do we do as a government to help our Main Street brick and mortar businesses versus the internet sales businesses, which are doing very, very well and don't in many cases collect that sales tax.
And I believe they should.
And actually, there was a proposal in the Senate that
Right.
I think we're going to take up, if not before the break, then afterwards, to talk about what we should do if the federal government makes some changes in regard to that law as well, about collecting taxes on internet sales.
Now, people should realize, there are some internet sales that are taxed. If you purchase something from any sort of merchant who actually has a physical presence in Massachusetts. So if you bought something from Best Buy, if you bought something from Sears, you'll pay sales tax.
Even Amazon now has
Or Amazon, that's right,
in-
because they have a presence here. If you buy from some entity that doesn't have a physical presence, you don't necessarily pay a sales tax. And the reality is that some of our small businesses say that people will come in, they'll shop, they'll look, they'll see the product, say, okay, this is the one I want, then rush home, buy it online, not pay the sales tax, get free shipping. And so the reality is all the service is being provided by our local businesses, but they're not reaping the revenue. And if the sales tax were uniformly applied to all internet sales, then I think you'd see people saying, well, I might as well buy it at the physical store here in Massachusetts so I can take it home today and not have to wait for the shipping, which may take several days or in some cases several weeks.
One of the things I've always liked, and I've been in the legislature now for over 10 years, so I've been around since, as have you, John. We came in together, actually, as we talked about in our last show. But I came in as the sales tax proposal was first being raised. And what I liked about that was that we wanted to do it at a time when traditionally shopkeepers tell us that the sales are low. Summertime, people are on vacation, they're out at the beach, they're just not shopping. And with school vacations ending soon and people going back to school, we wanted to time it a little bit with parents going back to school to buy supplies and backpacks and pencils and things for the kids. I don't even think they use pencils in school anymore, do they?
I think they do.
The whole point was to try to give them a little bit of a break and to incentivize them to purchase things that they normally would do, but to give them a break from the state's 6.25% sales tax. And it acts as, at least the proponents, and I'm one of those proponents, but it acts as sort of a multiplier in that if you're going to go out for the weekend of the 15th and 16th to go shopping, then you might very well also fill up your gas tank and pay the gas tax. And you might very well go to the restaurant in your town or at some town nearby and pay the restaurant, the meals tax, which is sometimes in many cases 7%. So you're paying taxes there that you normally wouldn't, that we wouldn't be capturing as a Commonwealth. And of course, those taxes that we capture, that we take in, go into the general fund so that we can fund the things in the state budget that we just talked about.
And individuals, consumers from other states, from nearby
Right.
states, Rhode Island and Connecticut,
Right.
may come to Massachusetts that weekend and say, okay, why should I pay the sales tax in Connecticut, Rhode Island? I'll come to Massachusetts, make the purchases there, so that we actually are enticing people from other states to come to Massachusetts to make those purchases.
John and I have colleagues that represent the North Shore, sort of that boundary between Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and they tell us stories about how it's very hard to find a realtor, I'm sorry, not a realtor, what's the word I'm thinking
Retailer?
of? A retailer, thank you. A retailer within that boundary in Massachusetts for the first 10 or 15 miles, because a lot of people in the north part of the state will just travel right into New Hampshire and buy everything tax-free. And so I think what we were talking on the way in as we were coming to tape the show, that something's got to be done, I think, in Massachusetts. And I know there's going to be some proposals in the future. I would actually talk about, I would like to see the sales tax rolled back to some extent, but then extended equally to every product, whether it was online or in a brick and mortar store. And I think there's been talk of that proposal, that if we do end up eventually taxing everything that you purchase on the internet, then at least we could roll that sales tax back from 6.25, maybe lower, maybe not back to 5%, but at least somewhere in between 5 and 6.25. Again, to make us competitive with our neighboring states.
I saw a commercial on television the other night, and it was a Boston area store that said, okay, you don't have to wait for sales tax weekend. Right now, we will reduce our prices by twice the sales tax amount. So instead of saving 6.25%, you can save 12.5%. And so I think businesses are also doing various ways of competing. It's almost like akin to the Black Friday situation. What can we do to ensure that we're getting that business? But also for those businesses, let's try to spread this thing out so it's not a crazy atmosphere all day Saturday and Sunday, and then the following week you see that absolutely no one is coming into your business because now the sales tax has been restored.
That's right. But we find that it's very competitive among retailers anyway, and many of them, when they offer sales, are going to offer them much higher than 6.25%, and you're liable to get 10 or 25% off things. But for some reason, and I don't know the science behind it, but I can understand why people feel this way, they like to get, or at least feel like they're getting one over on the government, that for that one weekend they don't have to pay that sales tax back to Uncle Sam, back to Boston, and I can sort of understand that.
So sales tax weekend is sort of like an Olympic event. How's that for a segue?
Very good. Let's talk about that, because that's going on right now.
Yeah, yesterday we learned that Boston was no longer in the running for the Olympics.
Did you expect that? That came a lot faster than I thought.
It did, except it was really interesting on Friday, where they said they wanted the governor to make a commitment.
Yeah, before you saw the
report, saying,
report,
we
right.
want you to come into this conference call and say one way or the other whether you're supporting the Olympics. And the governor, the speaker, and the Senate president agreed several months ago to hire a consultant at a cost of $250,000, which I think was a reasonable thing to do, to determine what benefits are we going to derive from this.
And then wait for the return on that report, which hasn't happened yet.
And I think what was happening is probably behind the scenes, the United States Olympic Committee, with some pressure probably from the International Olympic Committee, knew what that report's going to say. They knew what the end results were financially in London Olympics and in Beijing and other countries and past experiences. So they knew it probably, I'm guessing, that it wasn't going to be a real positive report. So let's try to make that commitment before you get the results of the report.
And when Marty Walsh, our former colleague in the House and currently the mayor of the city of Boston, stepped up and said, hey, I'm being asked to sign this paperwork before I've seen what it's going to cost us, and he said, I refuse to do that, we sort of said, well, that's the end of the process. And indeed it is. And now now there's some hand-wringing, and there's also, what does it mean for Massachusetts, and did we lose face in the eyes of the nation and the world? I think Boston's a great city. I don't know if it was necessarily the right place for the Olympics, or the right time for the Olympics. Certainly we've got challenges here, but I don't think this says anything bad about the city of Boston at all. If anything, it's good, because it means we the policymakers and the governor and the mayor and everybody else listen to the constituents who are saying this isn't right for our state.
No, I agree. I think the problem was that they really didn't know what they wanted to do. Initially, it was going to be a walking Olympics. Right. Everything was going to be within a very narrow area in the Boston area. And then, well, now we'll start looking, and we'll do some events out in western Massachusetts, and we'll do some events down on the South Coast. And they continue to say, we're not going to use any tax dollars, it's not going to cost anything. But I was very skeptical. They talked about doing infrastructure improvements that were already on, I guess, in the pipeline or being considered, and we're just going to speed them up. Well, my concern is if you're going to do things like improve the MBTA for public transportation, do some road and bridge infrastructure, and speed that up so that it doesn't happen over a 10 or 15-year period, but now happens over a 5 to 7 or 8-year period, then what I saw was the big dig happening a second time, in that all the monies would go to Eastern Massachusetts for those projects, and out here in Western Massachusetts, we continue to see our roads and bridges deteriorate with no dollars. It just struck me as something that was too much of a pipe dream. I also was worried that the Olympic Village and housing was going to be built at UMass Boston.
Right.
UMass Boston was always intended to be a commuter school. I don't think we need to have UMass Boston compete with the Amherst campus. So there were a number of concerns and issues that, frankly, I understand why the decision was made in terms of pulling out, but I'm not disappointed. I think that I can watch the Olympics wherever they happen, whether it's Los Angeles or Paris,
Right.
on television, and recognize that we're not going to be paying for it for 10, 20, or 30 years after those events are over.
You almost feel, well, maybe you don't, but there's a sense that we can be a little bit guilty that we're going to enjoy the party somewhere else in the country at somebody else's expense. But then again, that is the Olympics. The world watches while one area, one state, or in some cases one country, foots the bill. In our case, I just literally think, and I agree with John, I think we have that Western Mass perspective. We lived through the big dig. We have that cynicism about when the government promises something, oh, there won't be any overruns, don't worry. We don't believe them. And so, you know, if anything, I think we did end up making out in that the eyes of the world was on Massachusetts for a short time. We were able to, as I think Mayor Walsh said yesterday in his press conference, showcase areas of the city for development that had never been considered before, and now some of those developments can still take place without actually the security costs and the other hassles of the Olympics coming. And I felt bad for residents of Boston, and I don't know many of them, but just knowing when something goes on in that city, how much gridlock occurs and how much you know, the residents and the businesses and industries get impacted. You know, I thought there would be a real, at least for 3 weeks out of that year, a real hassle and hardship for those people, and that now they won't have to experience.
Well, one of our colleagues, Representative Gloria Fox, made the statement saying, you know, my constituents, the people in my district,
Boston rep.
She's a Boston rep. My constituents are going to be captives in their own homes and won't be able to get around. I think it had a better shot if everybody had come clean right from the beginning with all of the numbers, had gotten some input, rather than switching horses midstream.
Right. They definitely changed their strategy because they knew that it wasn't going to be, well, the initial strategy, the initial report that they came out with, it wasn't being received warmly by either legislators, policymakers, financiers of the Olympics, or our constituents. So.
But I also think when you look at Rich Davey being paid $300,000 at the head.
Deval Patrick getting
$7,500 a day as a consultant, switching from John Fish to Steve Pagliuca. Right. I mean, it seemed like a comedy of errors.
Yeah, they were grasping at straws, trying to find that one thing that would help bring their cause home.
And so it's over from our perspective, and I think now we can look at what the infrastructure needs are that we're going to have to do over the next decade or 20 years, and plan appropriately for it without having the Olympic cloud hanging over our heads.
Which the legislature has already begun in following the Baker administration's proposal. During our budget process, both the House and Senate gave the governor what he needed to, what he requested, what we hope he needs to fix problems with the Massachusetts Bay Transit Authority in Boston, the MBTA, the commuter rail, and that infrastructure down there that we don't deal with too much out here in Western Massachusetts. There's no commuter rail for us. There's no trains or subways for us, but we recognize.
Except we pay for it.
But we do, yes, part of our sales tax and part of a lot of things.
People out here, I don't think realize that a penny of that 1%, 1 penny of that 6.25% sales tax goes directly to the MBTA, and so we're paying with no benefits. And when you start looking at the amount of money going into the infrastructure, and that's why when we look at transportation, it's important for us to ensure that our regional transit authorities, like the Pioneer Valley Transit Authority, get their fair share. We're paying for the T, and we need to get a return on that investment.
And so we recognize that infrastructure being one of the biggest things that all of us use, all of us benefit from, whether you're a resident, a constituent, a tourist, a business. If you're moving through the Commonwealth, any one of our cities and towns, you've got to drive on the roads. You've got to walk on the sidewalks and cross the bridges and use the airports, and we understand all those things. And so we recognize, even without the Olympic Games, the need to improve how we spend our money and what we spend our money on, and to make sure that we're fixing these this infrastructure to last. What's also going on right now as we film this tape the show is work on the viaduct in downtown Springfield, Route 91, right through the center of the city. At the same time, the city of Springfield begins work on the new casino. So there's a lot happening in Western Massachusetts.
Well, the other thing that I think can help mitigate some of the issues and the impact of the viaduct construction is the commuter rail. I mean,
Right.
and so we've only got the one trip a day, but it's another, interestingly, it's another benefit coming from the MBTA that the trains and the cars going to be utilized on that train really are refurbished MBTA cars
right.
that we've received at no cost from the MBTA, other than
It's
some
going
of
to
the
be a
refurbishment.
boatload to refurbish them, but
That's right.
the cars were free.
But initially it was a situation where it's one trip a day, but eventually looking at that corridor going really from Greenfield down into Springfield, eventually down into Hartford, I think it is going to be terrific in terms of opening the opportunities of people going to Montreal, going to New York City, and hopefully the success there can lead to the next step, which is looking at East-West Rail.
And we've seen the platforms open in Greenfield and in Northampton. The Holyoke platform is scheduled to open in August.
Yep.
And so the ride will be, the train will be available to ride and take, and they're going to try to make sure it's utilized more than just a couple of trips a day, because commuters have said and requested more rides means, or more runs of the train means a better likelihood of utilization. And more utilization, obviously, more consistent utilization means more money that the trains can take in, which helps, of course, offset the price.
Interestingly, I mean, although I'm sure most people aren't aware of the fact that trains are already running, the data is showing that the ridership is higher than what they expected in terms of getting started. So hopefully, with the construction, you'll see more of that happening, and will alleviate some of the potential problems on I-91.
I have a little boy who turns 4 in a couple of weeks, and one of the things my mom and dad do when they have Quinn is they take him to the train station in downtown Springfield, and they watch trains go by. So he loves trains, and I figure that sometime later on this summer, after the platform opens up in Holyoke, I can go with Quinn and buy a ticket, and we can take a ride up to Greenfield and then a ride back. That might be a fun way to spend some time with my son.
I was waiting for you saying that the other solution for the viaduct problem is to have people get off of 91, go through Westfield into your district. And then get back.
Certainly go through Agawam, that's true. Construction season, I know people hate it. We hear it all the time. All winter long we complain about potholes, and in the summer when we're trying to fix it, we complain about construction. But we have such a short season here in the Northeast and in Massachusetts that, yeah, if it's a summer month, it means there's construction going on somewhere.
But that's another good thing in terms of the budget and what the governor
also
did.
helps our economy,
in terms of the supplemental budget too, in terms of providing more dollars in terms of road repair.
Yeah, and we voted for
Chapter
that
9.
increase because it's something that the previous governor didn't put forward. We wanted the governor to take more money and send it back to our cities and towns so that they could utilize it. And one of the first things that Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito did after meeting with the Speaker and the Senate President when they came in was to say, we'll put the money there and we'll release it right away, so that it's the start of that season. It's the start of the construction season. Early is going back, I think, even to March and April. That money was available so that, we do have to put up with the traffic jams and the construction problems during the summer, but that means the road work and the bridge work is getting done so to be ready in time for the next winter, which is coming before we know it.
I know. Want to switch to utilities?
Yeah, speaking of winter, last year we had, John and I both heard from a lot of our constituents about energy costs, and this is just part of the issue, but there was a real problem with electricity generation up here in the Northeast because the natural gas that would be used to power those electricity generators up here was in short supply because we're told, at least, of volume and pipeline transportation issues. So if you follow the news, you read about the pipeline proposals that are happening for out here in not just Massachusetts, but up here in the Northeast. And we've had to face.
Prior to even the pipeline issue in terms of what's being proposed, East Hampton certainly got hit really out of the blue in terms of moratorium on on natural gas for new buildings. And I know it affected Kevin Perrier in terms of his work over at Parsons School. Despite the fact, I mean, he switched over to another fuel, was able to get the project done. It was terrific. And it's one area that the mayor really stepped up to the plate, both in terms of meeting with Columbia Gas on that particular issue, continuing to try to find a short-term solution. And I was really pleased to see them actually working aggressively, trying to figure out what a short-term solution could be, because I also represent Hadley, which is affected by Berkshire Gas as opposed to Columbia Gas. And their response was, no, there's a moratorium in effect, and that moratorium stays until 2018 or 2019, until after this Kinder Morgan pipeline is built in the northern tier of Massachusetts into New Hampshire and Vermont. It's really an unfortunate situation for people who want to convert, people who are trying to realistically address their energy needs, go for a fuel that's less expensive, then be told, sorry, you can't do it.
About the cleanest thing that's available out there, and other than solar and wind and water. So we feel bad for those consumers that want to change and want to become more energy efficient, more cost effective, and everything, and more environmentally friendly, because now that they've made that decision to switch to natural gas, they're being told that that capacity isn't there. So that brings into play the pipeline issue, which John and I again speaking off camera earlier. We're talking about how when the Federal Energy Commission decides to do something, they don't necessarily consult us at the local level. So we feel a little bit powerless to address what they're saying is a need. Now I'm hearing it as a need, but I'm also respectful of the constituents that I hear from who are against expansion of any pipeline or even transmission line for electricity, because they favor expansion of solar and wind and bio and of course hydro. Actually, speaking of hydro, I think the governor just signed a compact with the New England governors just recently to contract with Canada and the hydropower plants up north to provide more of our portfolio of energy from hydro into the future for some long-term gains as part of the portfolio of energy that Massachusetts receives.
And we have to do it regionally. One of my concerns with the Kinder Morgan pipeline is they talk about how much gas is going to be generated, and it far exceeds the anticipated use that's necessary here in Massachusetts. I'm willing to say, what are the needs regionally? But my concern is I don't want a pipeline being constructed with the intent purpose of being able to sell the excess gas to the Ukraine, to sell it overseas. Part of being, the selling point is that if we get this extra gas, it's going to lower the price. Well, once you start selling it overseas, you're going to see those prices go up, and eventually it'll go back up and up. So I don't think that the inconvenience, the issues of crossing and ruining pristine farmland, natural resources, publicly protected lands is justifiable to provide energy resources for another country or even another area outside the Northeast region. But I think it's great to see Governor Baker sitting with the region governors of New England as well as New York, talk to the Canadian provinces, see what we absolutely have to do. And the problem when you start looking at some of the alternatives is, let's pick solar, solar or wind. The reality here in New England is that it's unpredictable, that unlike other states, you're not going to be able to get solar benefits 100% of the time, every day. So if I can sell, if I put solar panels on my home and I'm able to sell it back to the grid, that's terrific. But the grid and the utility companies have to plan on the fact that I may not be able to provide it tomorrow or for the next week because of storms.
They want reliable energy.
So how do we balance that? And I think by looking at various sources, we can ultimately get to where we need to be.
We've also been contacted in our offices here and at the State House about the issue of net metering and how the Commonwealth is up against its net metering cap. And we recognize that we're going to have to take action as a legislature and as a state Department of Public Utilities and Energy Resources to do something to change or either to lift the cap or to allow that to happen so that consumers who are interested in producing their own electricity by home solar panels are able to do that.
The last thing I want to do on the utility piece is also talk about the individuals who wound up switching from one electricity provider to another.
Yeah, we lucked out
and
on
got that big surprise
last year.
with the surcharge, and it was here in East Hampton again. There were a couple of individuals who spoke to the mayor. We had a meeting with them. They actually came to
called
another
us.
meeting in Hadley and various places, and through efforts, legislative efforts.
Yeah, actually, a core group of us, and John and I were two of those who signed off on a letter to say, first of all, to let the Department of Public Utilities know that the issue was happening as a part of a holdover from the 1990 energy deregulation. If you switched your energy provider in the hopes of getting a lower rate and then got a new lower rate provider, your old provider would then be able to send you a bill at a higher rate than you were paying to pay for that reclassification and that shift. We wanted to say that we didn't think that was fair. At the very least, we didn't think it should happen without those providers notifying our consumers that would happen. And every step along the way, we've been successful. First, the Department of Public Utilities said to providers, you must notify. And then they said, you must stop doing that. And now, fortunately, after the budget amendments that we put through and that passed and that the governor signed, if there were people that did change last year, switch in the middle of the heating season, they will be able to get a reimbursement or either a rebate or a credit for the energy that they, or for the price that they had to pay for that reclassification rate. So that's something that we've been working on, well, since winter. And I thank John for signing on to our letter and being a part of that team that helped us to make the case to the government, to our state government, that wasn't either fair, it wasn't something that was even necessary, and so we've got to survive. That was a nice budget win for us that came through in the final budget.
I think it illustrates and demonstrates why it's important for people to stay in touch with legislators. Sometimes the thought is, well, there's nothing that I can do, or they're not going to listen to one person. And the reality is, with over 6,000 bills before us and the amount of legislation dealing with the budget, we're not aware of all the issues and concerns. I mean, this one kind of blindsided me, and I think blindsided
I didn't know
you as
anything
well.
about it until I started getting calls from constituents.
And as a result of those calls, change actually happened. And so it's important for people to realize that you can make a difference, that alert your legislators to some of the issues and concerns that may be a problem. And we certainly want to work with them in terms of finding a solution. Sometimes there are things that are unique to this district, unique to this community. Sometimes, as this case was, it was really across the board. But nobody was really pushing it as hard as the individuals here in East Hampton and the Pioneer Valley, and that's what really started the whole process. So there are people all across the state who got benefits, but it really started right here.
Yeah, and it wasn't even something that we had to do through a bill or a budget amendment, although ultimately we did, but it started with a letter and phone calls and advocacy on our part to our colleagues at the executive, and it worked. But that advocacy only began because you reached out and called my office, or you called John Sybeck's office, or you got in touch with your local legislators, and then we formed a coalition again, as we constantly do here in Western Massachusetts, Republicans, Democrats, House members and Senate members working together, by and large, to try to do better things for our constituents. And it's just a benefit that the rest of the state enjoys, but it began here in Western Mass. So before we wrap up the show this month, we thought it would be important to at least provide our office contact information so that you can get in touch with us if issues arise, whether they be issues that impact just you specifically, or maybe something you think we should know about for the entire town or the entire state. So again, my name is Don Humison. My office is in Westfield. I have an office at 64 Noble Street in downtown Westfield, and you can reach me by telephone at 568-1366. So 568-1366. I tell people here in Western Mass to call me locally. I do have an office in Boston. You're certainly welcome to call me down there, but I try to spend as much time here in Western Massachusetts as I can. So call the local number. Last thing I'll do is give my email address before I kick it back to Chairman Sybeck. But my email is donald.humison, Humason, at masenate.gov. So donald.humison at masenate.gov. Either reach out by phone or reach out by email, get in touch with us, and if we can help in any way, that's sort of what we're here to do.
Absolutely. And similarly, although I live in South Hadley, I represent East Hampton, and like Don, it is much easier for us to meet with people, to talk with people here in the district. I can be reached at 413-539-6566. It's 413-539-6566. The Boston number is 617-722-2030. Email address is john.cibak, that's SCIBAK, @mahouse.gov. And if there's anything we can do, don't hesitate to contact either one of us. We're always working together and really want to work on behalf of you, the citizens of East Hampton. So thanks for watching.
Thanks for your time.
We'll see you again next month.